Welcome to the Curio Flow Show, where we satisfy those cravings, for the unexpected. Today, we're diving into, well, I guess you could say an electric current of curiosity. It's electrifying the world of agriculture, and it's called electro-agriculture.
Oh, that's a good one.
What if, and just hear me out on this one, what if the future of farming, those sprawling fields of crops, what if they moved indoors?
Indoors.
Yeah, away from all that sunshine, into the dark.
Into the darkness. That's the intriguing premise behind this whole emerging field. It's called electro-agriculture, and it aims to, completely change how we produce food.
Whoa, hold on. So no more sun. We're talking about using electricity to grow plants.
Precisely, yeah. Instead of sunlight, the idea is to use electricity, hopefully from renewable sources, obviously. Think solar panels, things like that.
Okay, so I'm picturing like greenhouses, but powered by lightning bolts.
Not lightning bolts exactly, but you're on the right track. Instead of greenhouses, though, think bigger, much bigger. Think multi-story indoor farms, almost like skyscrapers, but for growing food.
Skyscraper farms. Now, that's a visual I wasn't quite expecting. But I have to ask, how do you grow plants without sunlight? Photosynthesis, right? That's how plants get their energy, and that needs sunlight.
Absolutely, you're right. Photosynthesis is the foundation of plant life, as we all learned back in school, right? And here's the kicker, the process itself isn't actually that efficient. It only converts about 1% of light energy into chemical energy that the plant can use.
Really, only 1%? Wow, I never knew it was that inefficient. So electroagriculture is basically saying, hey, we can do better than that.
That's a great way to put it. And, the research actually supports that. Current research suggests that electroagriculture could be 4 times more efficient than regular old photosynthesis.
4 times. So we're talking about 4% efficiency.
Exactly.
Okay, that's a pretty big jump in efficiency. I'm starting to see why scientists are getting so excited about this. But I got to ask, what's the secret ingredient? What are these plants eating, if not sunlight?
The key ingredient, the special sauce, you could say, is called acetate. It's very similar to what you find in vinegar.
Hold up. Plants eating vinegar? What? How does that even work?
I know, right? It sounds strange, but scientists have figured out a way to convert solar energy into acetate, essentially making plant food from electricity.
Plant food from electricity, from something like vinegar. Okay, so do we, dunk them in barrels of vinegar or something?
No. Not quite that simple, but the concept is pretty fascinating. Scientists are genetically modifying these plants, to consume acetate. They're reactivating a metabolic pathway, one that's normally only active in seedlings.
Seedlings, you mean like when they first sprout?
Exactly, yeah. When a seed sprouts, it draws energy from its own reserves, those stored up in the seed. That's how it grows until it develops leaves and can start photosynthesizing. So electroagriculture is basically like hitting the rewind button on that process.
Reawakening the seedling stage in adult plants, letting them live off acetate instead of sunlight.
Exactly. It's incredible, isn't it?
Wow, that is some serious science.
Yeah.
So are we talking about creating entirely new species of plants here? Or are scientists just tweaking existing ones?
Right now, the research is focused on modifying existing crops, things like tomatoes and lettuce, to make them compatible with acetate. And it's still pretty early stages, but the potential, the potential is huge. Imagine being able to grow food anywhere, in any environment, completely independent of weather or seasons or even whether you have arable land.
Whoa, hold on. So no more worries about droughts or floods or even pesky bugs.
You got it.
And this could mean we could grow food in places where,
Yeah.
you couldn't before, right? Deserts, maybe even space.
You're getting it. You're absolutely right. And, agencies like NASA are very interested in this technology for space exploration exactly for that reason. Can you imagine space farming powered by vinegar?
Now, that's a story I'd love to tell my grandkids someday. But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. Are there any, real-world examples of this electroagriculture thing actually happening right now, not just in a lab somewhere?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's still early days. We're talking about cutting-edge stuff here. But there are companies and research institutions all over the world that are working on pilot projects, really trying to develop this technology. Right now, the main focus is on, proving the concept, and they're doing that with crops like tomatoes and lettuce.
Yeah.
But the goal, the big one, is to, scale this up, right? Adapt this technology to those staple crops that feed the world.
Staple crops, you mean like wheat and rice and all that?
Exactly.
So are we going to be replacing our wheat fields with these high-tech indoor farms anytime soon? What's the timeline on this?
It's probably a little too early to say that we're going to have a total agricultural revolution, anytime soon, but things are moving fast, I'll tell you that. One of the big challenges right now, though, is cost. Setting up these indoor farms, these vertical farms, it's a pretty big investment up front, and the technology is still being refined. It needs to get more efficient, more affordable.
Right, right. Makes sense. I mean, it's like with any new technology, right? It takes time and money for it to go from being this cool idea to something that everyone can actually use. Speaking of money, though, who's paying for all this research? Is it all government funded, or are private companies, jumping on this bandwagon?
It's a real mix, honestly. Governments are putting money into research and development, seeing this, as a potential answer to those big questions about food security, sustainability, all that. But you are seeing a lot of interest from venture capitalists and private companies too, those who see the dollar signs flashing.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
When the private sector starts getting interested, things are getting serious. But let's get down to brass tacks here. How do these indoor farms actually work? I mean, what does it actually look like inside one of these places?
Imagine, just rows and rows of plants all stacked vertically, and they're bathed in the glow of these LED lights that are, well, customized to like their exact needs. These plants, they're grown hydroponically, which means their roots are just kind of hanging out in a nutrient-rich solution, no soil.
Wait, hydroponics? Like that's another whole thing, right?
You're right, it is. And it's a key part of this whole indoor farming setup. Hydroponics gives you that very fine control over the nutrients and water that the plants are getting. It minimizes waste, maximizes efficiency. It's pretty neat, actually.
So no more soil erosion, no more worrying about whether it's going to rain enough, and no more having to deal with pests and weeds.
You got it.
Sounds almost too good to be true. But, there's got to be some downsides, right?
Of course there are. Every new technology has those. One of the things people are concerned about is the energy these indoor farms use, You need a lot of electricity to power those lights, those climate control systems, and of course the acetate production.
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't want to trade one environmental problem, all the fossil fuels used in traditional agriculture, for another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why the focus is really on integrating renewable energy sources. We're talking solar, wind power, things like that. The ultimate goal is to make electro-agriculture not just more efficient, but also ideally carbon neutral, maybe even carbon negative.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better about the whole thing. But what about the plants themselves? We're talking about GMOs here, right?
Yeah.
Genetically modified organisms. I know that's kind of a controversial topic.
It is, yeah. GMOs are a bit of a hot potato, you could say. A lot of misinformation out there, and honestly, a lot of fear, too. But yes, to answer your question, the plants used in electro-agriculture are genetically modified. That's how they're able to consume acetate.
I can just picture the headlines now. Franken food farms rise in skyscrapers. How do you respond to those concerns, those worries people have about GMOs?
You have to approach this topic with facts, right?
Yeah.
With science. The vast majority of studies, the scientific evidence shows that GMOs are perfectly safe for us to eat. Plus, they have the potential to solve some big problems, food security, sustainability, things like that.
That's a good point. We shouldn't let fear dictate how we, approach new technologies.
Yeah.
But I get it. There's a lot of skepticism out there. How do you convince people that this is, a safe and viable way to actually produce the food we eat?
It's definitely a challenge, I'll admit that. But the answer is transparency, education, open communication. We need to talk to people, answer their questions, and, explain the benefits in a way that makes sense that people can connect with.
It sounds like a huge task. But I mean, the payoff, if it works, it seems worth it. This is, groundbreaking stuff, And honestly, it's got me thinking, what are some of the ethical considerations here? Are we, playing God by engineering these plants in this way?
That's a very important question to be asking. And, scientists are discussing that very thing right now. We have to think about what might happen, those, unintended consequences. And we need to be very careful to ensure that this technology is developed and used responsibly, ethically, the right way.
We've just scratched the surface here, and I've already got a million more questions. This feels like a whole new world of possibilities is opening up, and I got to say, I'm pretty excited to see where this goes.
It really is. It's a field full of potential, and it makes you think about the future of food, how we relate to nature, It taps into that, that basic human curiosity, how things work, and maybe even how we can like work with nature, but in these new and innovative ways.
You mentioned earlier that this could help us like move towards more sustainable food systems, right?
Yeah.
I definitely want to hear more about that. How does electroagriculture, how does it stack up against traditional farming when it comes to, the environment?
One of the biggest advantages, I'd say, is that it could drastically reduce how much land we use for farming. Think about it. If we can grow food vertically, in these controlled environments, we wouldn't need those massive fields anymore.
So we could like give that land back to nature, let forests regrow, restore those ecosystems. That's a really cool thought. What about water usage? That's a big issue with traditional farming, right? Especially with all these droughts happening.
You're absolutely right. Water scarcity is a huge problem globally. But electroagriculture, especially when you combine it with hydroponics, it can really cut down on how much water we use. Those closed loop systems, they recycle and reuse water, which means less waste and, well, less strain on our freshwater resources.
So it's a win-win for the environment and for water conservation.
Okay, what about pesticides? I mean, those are a huge concern with traditional farming. Do we still need to like spray all these chemicals on these indoor crops?
That's another area where electroagriculture really shines. And those controlled environments, the risk of pests and diseases, it's just much lower. So you need way fewer pesticides, if any at all.
Okay, that's great news. Less pollution, healthier ecosystems, and I'm guessing healthier food for us too, right? But what about the energy to actually run these like high-tech farms? Doesn't that create a different kind of environmental impact?
Yeah, you do need electricity, right, to power those lights, the climate control, the whole acetate production process. But, and this is where things get really interesting, scientists are looking at ways to integrate renewable energy sources into these farms.
So like solar panels, wind turbines, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So, we could potentially have food production that's carbon neutral, maybe even carbon negative. That would be incredible. Okay, let's talk about the food itself. How do these acetate-fed crops, how do they actually compare to like the stuff we grow traditionally? I mean, in terms of taste, nutrition, the whole quality thing.
That's a great question. And, a lot of research is focused on that right now. The early studies suggest that there isn't a big difference in the nutritional content of crops grown with electroagriculture compared to, those grown out in the fields.
So no loss of vitamins or minerals, which is good. What about the taste, though? I have to ask, I mean, I'm picturing these plants like being force-fed vinegar and ending up tasting, well, pretty vinegary.
Huh. Don't worry, it's not like they're soaking in vinegar baths.
Yeah.
That acetate, it's incorporated into a special nutrient solution, one that's designed to give the plants everything they need.
So no weird aftertaste.
Nope, not at all. The initial taste tests have actually shown that these crops taste pretty much the same, maybe even better than traditionally grown stuff.
Okay, wow. So we're talking about food that's potentially more sustainable, potentially healthier, and potentially even tastier. But I got to ask about the elephant in the room. What about the cost? Will this, like, futuristic food be affordable for everyone, or is it going to be, just for the wealthy?
That's a really important consideration. And, well, researchers and entrepreneurs are working on that. Right now, the costs are pretty high, especially to set up those indoor farms, which can make the produce more expensive.
So it's like any new technology, right? It starts out expensive, and then as it gets, more widely used, the price comes down.
Exactly. As the technology matures, as it gets more efficient, those costs are expected to drop. We've seen that happen with, other technologies like solar panels or electric cars.
So maybe someday soon, we'll all be eating vinegar-powered produce. Okay, but what about the farmers? I mean, the people who are growing food the traditional way. Is this going to put them out of business?
That's a valid concern, and it's something we need to think carefully about. The goal of electroagriculture isn't to replace traditional farming overnight. It's more about giving us more tools, more options to meet that growing demand for food, but in a sustainable way.
So it's not like either, it's more like both.
Yeah.
Like they can coexist, maybe even complement each other.
Exactly. We'll always need different approaches to agriculture, right? We have to consider those local conditions, those cultural traditions, what consumers actually want.
That makes sense. Variety is the spice of life, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's zoom out for a minute. Big picture stuff. Could electroagriculture help us solve like those big global food security challenges?
Absolutely. One of the most exciting aspects of this is that we could potentially address food deserts, those urban areas where it's hard to find fresh, affordable produce. Imagine turning those abandoned warehouses or like rooftops into vertical farms, bringing that fresh food directly to the people who need it most.
That's a great idea. And it could change not just our food systems, but also our cities, our communities. But I got to ask, what about, the potential for this technology to be used for, I don't know, less noble purposes?
Yeah.
Could someone use this to, like, create a monopoly on food production? You'd have it all controlled by a few powerful corporations.
That's a risk with any powerful technology, right?
Mm.
And it's one we need to be very aware of. It's really important that electro-agriculture benefits everyone, not just a select few. That means we need to promote those open source technologies, support those small-scale farmers, make sure everyone has access to the knowledge and resources they need to use these systems.
So it's not just about the science. It's about making sure this technology is, well, ethical, equitable, beneficial to all, right?
That's it, exactly. It's about using this innovation, to create a more just and sustainable future for everyone.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from those acetate-fueled plants to the potential for skyscraper farms feeding our cities. What are some of the big challenges researchers are still trying to figure out? Like, what hurdles do we need to overcome for this whole electro-agriculture thing to really take off?
One thing that's still a work in progress is, well, how to make that acetate production more efficient. We've made progress for sure, but it still needs to use less energy, be more cost-effective.
So making that vinegar, so to speak, more efficiently and more cheaply, what else is on the research to-do list?
Another big one is, well, can we grow more types of crops this way? Right now, most of the research is on those fast-growing plants like tomatoes and lettuce.
So no vinegar-powered wheat fields or rice paddies anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
What's the holdup there? Why is it so hard to, adapt this tech to those crops?
Those staple crops like wheat or rice or corn, they have these, well, more complex growth cycles. They need different nutrients. It'll take more research, more innovation to get there.
Sounds like quite the challenge. But just imagine the impact if we could grow those crops, the ones that feed billions of people in a sustainable way.
That's the dream, right? And it's why a lot of people are putting their time, their energy, and their money into this research.
We've talked a lot about the good stuff, the benefits, but we should talk about the potential downsides too, right? Every new technology has those unintended consequences. What should we be, keeping an eye out for?
You're absolutely right. We have to be cautious. One concern is, well, what happens to biodiversity? If we only focus on a few types of crops, those that are genetically modified for these indoor farms.
So like putting all our eggs in one basket. If a disease comes along that these engineered crops can't handle, it could be a huge problem, right?
Exactly. That's why it's so important to keep that diversity, of crops and farming methods, traditional and the new ones. That's how we make sure our food system can adapt, that it's resilient.
Diversity is key, not just in nature, but in how we approach food production too. It seems like we still have a lot to learn about electro-agriculture, the good and the bad, but I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty optimistic. This technology, it could really help us solve some of those big global problems. I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years. Welcome back to the Curio Flow Show, where we've been, exploring this wild world of electro-agriculture. It's crazy to think that we might actually be, on the verge of a food revolution, growing crops in skyscrapers, powered by something like vinegar. But like any big technological leap, the question is, what's next?
Yeah, it's like we've opened this door to a whole new way of thinking about food production, and we're just starting to peek inside. And the cool thing is, the advances aren't just in plant science, It's coming from engineering, data science, even artificial intelligence.
Whoa, AI. Okay, now you've really got my curiosity going. How could artificial intelligence, how could that fit into these, high-tech farms of the future? I'm picturing robot farmers tending rows of these glowing plants.
Robot farmers, huh? That might be a little ways off, but AI is already playing a part in electro-agriculture. Imagine this. You have sensors everywhere, constantly monitoring those plants, picking up data on everything like temperature, humidity, nutrient levels, how fast they're growing. All of that data, it gets fed into these AI algorithms that can, get this, adjust the growing conditions in real time. It's optimizing everything, you know, for yield, for using resources efficiently, even for how the food tastes.
So we're talking about personalized care for each plant. It's like a digital green thumb, one that knows exactly what each plant needs to, to really thrive. That's amazing. Are there like companies out there, research groups who are actually doing this, putting this AI stuff into practice?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are startups popping up all over the place that are developing these AI systems for indoor farming. Some of them are working on like predictive models to like prevent diseases before they even happen. Others are figuring out how to optimize the lighting, the watering, all based on, what each specific type of plant
It's
needs.
almost like we're like giving these plants a voice,
Yeah.
letting them tell us what they need through data. And
Yeah.
then we're using AI to like listen and respond, helping them grow the best they can.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's switch gears a bit. What about, the people buying and eating this food? If this whole electro-agriculture thing really takes off, how will it change how we like shop for groceries, how we consume food?
One of the most exciting possibilities is that we could have like this hyper local food production. Imagine having vertical farms right there in your city, providing fresh local produce all year round. It wouldn't matter what the weather's like outside, what season it is. You'd always have access to that fresh local food.
So no more like shipping food across the country and across the world even, no more relying on those big complicated supply chains that, can get disrupted pretty easily. It'd be like having a farmer's market right in your neighborhood, open 365 days a year. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
But what about the price? Will this locally grown high-tech food, will it be affordable? I mean, for regular people, not just like the rich and famous.
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's one that's driving a lot of innovation in this field. The goal is to make this technology accessible to everyone, not just a select few. And, we're already seeing some good signs. As we get better at producing this food, as the technology gets more efficient, those prices are starting to come down.
Okay, that's good news. But even if the price is right, will people actually buy this stuff? I mean,
Right.
there's this idea out there that like anything grown indoors, anything that uses a lot of technology, that it's somehow less natural,
Hmm.
and maybe even less healthy.
That's true. Consumer perception is a big hurdle. We need to do a better job of explaining the benefits,
Mm.
the environmental benefits, the social benefits, and of course, the potential for better quality, better taste. As people learn more about those, I think they'll be more open to, trying this new way of growing food.
It's like any big change, right? It takes time for people to wrap their heads around new ideas, but you're right, those potential benefits, they're pretty hard to ignore. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world of electro-agriculture, what's like the one big takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that electroagriculture shows us what happens when science, technology, and human ingenuity, when those all come together. It's like proof that we can push those boundaries, find new ways to feed ourselves while still taking care of our planet.
It reminds us that even with all the problems in the world, there's still a reason to be, hopeful, optimistic. It's a chance to tap into that curiosity we all have, that drive to explore, to invent, to build a better future, not just for us, but for the generations that come after us.
So stay curious, ask those questions, and let's keep working towards a future where technology and nature, where they can work together. A world where everyone has access to good food, food that's nutritious and grown in a way that doesn't harm the planet.
That's a future I can get behind. Thanks for joining us on this electrifying journey through the world of electroagriculture. Until next time, keep that current of curiosity flowing.